Welcome back to Today Assets Report, your number one destination for breaking crypto news, market analysis, and blockchain insights that can actually transform the way you think about your investments. I'm your host, and let me tell you, today's episode is absolutely critical for anyone holding XRP or anyone who's been watching the digital asset space, wondering when the real institutional adoption is finally going to arrive. We're covering something that 99% of XRP holders have absolutely no idea about. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. We're talking about actual timelines being set right now, real banks preparing to go live with blockchain technology, and a flip-the-switch moment that's closer than most people in this space could possibly imagine. This isn't speculation, this isn't hopium, and this definitely isn't another one of those videos that just rehashes the same old talking points you've heard 1,000 times before. What I'm sharing with you today is based on institutional movements, partnership developments, regulatory shifts, and timeline indicators that point to something massive happening in the XRP ecosystem in the very near future. So make sure you're subscribed to Today Assets Report, hit that notification bell, and settle in because the information we're about to break down could completely change your perspective on where we are in the XRP adoption cycle and what's coming next. Let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, which is why 99% of XRP holders don't understand what's actually happening right now beneath the surface. The crypto market moves fast, attention spans are short, and most people are focused on daily price action, what's trending on social media, and which coins are pumping today. But institutional adoption of blockchain technology doesn't happen on crypto Twitter timelines. It happens on institutional timelines, which means years of relationship building, months of testing and integration, regulatory compliance processes, and technical infrastructure development that all has to happen before a single real transaction gets processed. Ripple has been playing this long game for years now, building relationships with hundreds of financial institutions around the world, developing the technology that makes fast and cheap cross-border payments possible, and waiting for the regulatory environment to mature enough that major banks feel comfortable deploying this technology at scale. That waiting period has been frustrating for a lot of XRP holders who wanted to see instant results. But here's what most people don't realize. That waiting period is essentially over. We're now entering the deployment phase, and the timeline for banks actually going live with blockchain payment rails is much shorter and much more concrete than the general public understands. When we talk about banks flipping the switch, we need to be very specific about what that actually means in practical terms. These aren't small fintech startups or experimental projects running on the side. We're talking about major multinational banking institutions, the kind that process trillions of dollars in transactions every single year, and they're preparing to integrate blockchain technology into their core payment infrastructure. Think about what that really means. A bank doesn't just decide one day to completely revolutionize how they move money across borders. There's extensive testing that has to happen, there's integration with existing legacy systems, there's staff training, there's regulatory approval, there's security auditing, and there's a whole timeline of checkpoints that have to be completed before anything goes live with real customer funds. The reason I'm so confident that we're close to seeing major deployments is because many of these institutions have already completed the testing phases, they've already done the integration work, and they're literally just waiting for the final regulatory clarity and internal approval processes to complete before they flip the switch and start processing real transactions at scale. Now let's talk about why XRP specifically is positioned at the center of this institutional adoption wave. Ripple didn't just create a cryptocurrency and hope banks would use it. They identified one of the biggest pain points in global finance, which is the ridiculous cost and speed of international money transfers, and they built an entire ecosystem specifically designed to solve that problem. Right now, when you send money internationally through traditional banking systems, that money has to go through a network of correspondent banks. It can take anywhere from 3 to 5 business days to actually settle. And the fees can be anywhere from $25 to $75 or even more depending on the amount and the destination. Each intermediary bank along the way takes a cut. There's currency conversion happening multiple times, and the whole process is slow, expensive, and completely outdated for our modern global economy. What Ripple and XRP offer is a way to settle those exact same transactions in 3 to 5 seconds instead of 3 to 5 days, with fees that are literally fractions of a penny instead of dozens of dollars. The efficiency gain is so dramatic that once a bank starts using this technology and sees how much money they can save and how much better the customer experience is, there's really no going back to the old system. The timeline that's being set right now isn't vague or indefinite. We're looking at very specific implementation schedules that banks are working toward, and these schedules are tied to a combination of factors that are all aligning at the same time. First, there's regulatory clarity, and we've seen enormous progress on this front recently with court decisions and evolving guidance from financial regulators that's removing the uncertainty that was holding banks back from full deployment. Second, there's technical readiness, and the banks that have been testing blockchain payment technology for months or years have now completed their testing phases and proven that the technology works at scale. Third, there's competitive pressure, because the banks that deploy this technology first are going to have a significant advantage in terms of offering faster and cheaper services to their customers, which means everyone else has to follow or risk losing market share. When you combine regulatory clarity with technical readiness and competitive pressure, you create conditions where deployment accelerates dramatically, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now. Here's something that's absolutely critical to understand about the demand equation for XRP once banks start going live with this technology. Right now, the vast majority of XRP trading is speculative, meaning people are buying and selling based on what they think the price will be in the future, not based on any actual utility or use case. But when banks start using XRP as a bridge currency to settle real cross-border payments, you introduce a completely different kind of demand into the market. This is real, sustained, high-volume demand that has nothing to do with speculation and everything to do with utility. Every time a bank uses XRP to settle a payment, they need to acquire XRP, use it for the transaction, and then it gets sold on the other side and converted into the destination currency. This creates constant buying pressure from institutions that need XRP to facilitate their payment flows. Now think about the scale of global cross-border payments. We're talking about an industry that processes trillions of dollars every single year. If even a small percentage of that volume starts moving through blockchain rails using XRP, we're talking about demand that could absolutely dwarf the current speculative trading volume. The competitive dynamics in the banking sector are going to create a cascade effect that accelerates adoption faster than most people expect. Banks are intensely competitive institutions, and if one major bank successfully deploys blockchain payment technology and starts offering their customers international transfers that are faster and cheaper than what competitors can offer, those competitors have to respond or they're going to lose business. This creates a situation where early adoption by a few leaders forces adoption by everyone else, and we've seen this exact pattern play out with other technology transitions in the banking sector. Think about how quickly banks adopted online banking once the first movers proved it was viable, or how quickly they adopted mobile banking once customers started demanding it. The same dynamic is going to play out with blockchain payments. The first bank to go live gets a competitive advantage. The second and third banks are trying to catch up, and by the time you get to the 10th or 20th bank, it's no longer about competitive advantage, it's about basic survival and staying relevant in a market that's moving past the old technology. Here's what a lot of XRP holders might not fully appreciate about the regulatory progress we've seen recently. The clarity that's emerging around XRP's status isn't just good news in a general sense, it's literally a prerequisite for major institutional deployment. Banks are among the most heavily regulated institutions in the world, and they absolutely cannot deploy financial technology that exists in a regulatory gray area or that might expose them to compliance risk. The progress we've seen with recent court decisions, the evolving guidance from financial regulators, and the increasing acceptance of digital assets as a legitimate part of the financial system, all of this is clearing the path for banks to deploy blockchain payment technology without fear that they're going to get slapped with enforcement actions or regulatory penalties down the road. This regulatory clarity has been one of the main things holding back full-scale deployment, and now that we're seeing that clarity emerge in major markets, the timeline for banks going live accelerates dramatically. What might have been a 3-year or 5-year plan suddenly becomes a 1-year or even 6-month plan because the main obstacle has been removed. Let me be very clear about something. I'm not here to give you price predictions or tell you that XRP is going to hit some specific number by some specific date, because that's not responsible analysis, and it's not something anyone can predict with certainty. What I will tell you is that basic economics suggests that when you introduce sustained high-volume demand for an asset with a capped supply, price appreciation is a natural consequence. XRP has a maximum supply of 100 billion tokens, and a significant portion of that supply is locked in escrow with predictable release schedules. If banks around the world start settling even a fraction of their cross-border payments using XRP, the amount of XRP that needs to be purchased and used for these transactions becomes very substantial. The specific price impact depends on variables we can't predict with certainty, but the directional impact is clear. More utility equals more demand, and more demand with fixed supply puts upward pressure on price. So what does all of this mean for you as someone who's holding XRP or considering a position? It means we're at a genuinely unique moment in the timeline where the infrastructure has been built, the partnerships are in place, the technology has been tested and proven, the regulatory path is clearing, and the actual deployment is beginning. 99% of XRP holders might not fully understand how close we are to seeing this technology go live at institutional scale, but now you're in that 1% that gets it. The question becomes what you do with that information. I'm not telling you to buy or sell anything. That's a decision you have to make based on your own financial situation and risk tolerance. But I am telling you to pay very close attention to what happens in the institutional adoption space over the next 6 to 12 months. The announcements are going to start coming faster, the payment volumes are going to start growing, and at some point the market is going to wake up and recognize what's been building beneath the surface all this time. Thank you so much for watching today's Assets Report. If this information was valuable to you, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of our future coverage as this institutional adoption story continues to develop. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Do you believe banks going live with blockchain payments is going to be the catalyst that unlocks XRP's potential? I read every single comment and I love hearing different perspectives from our community. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic, keep your eyes on the institutional developments, and I'll see you in the next video right here on Today's Assets Report.